I'm gonna do this flower demo. As you can see, I kind of already started it here. This is gonna be a little bit more sculptural, so we can build onto it rather than the chains where we're making each and like making a long thing. So I'll show you a little bit on how you're gonna utilize this wooden tool or stand. I mentioned earlier that when you let glass cool down and you wanna continue putting pieces to it, you're gonna need a fan heat it to keep it from cracking. You'll see that with this. So yeah, I'm gonna make maybe like 2 more petals and attach it so y'all can see the process of that. And hopefully you guys can make some flowers too. This is the scale I'm working on. You can do this at any sort of scale if you would like. If you want to make smaller flowers too, that's totally fine. We can get you some smaller rods. But we went ahead and cut up some rods of these sizes if y'all want to try to attempt this size. Okay, so to get started, I'm going to start with my petal. And I'm going to take one of the thicker rods. I believe this is 6 millimeter. A little bit larger than what your chains are. And I'm gonna heat up this top piece. You guys have been working with just the inner layer of the torch. We turned on the outer layer for this. This will give you way more heat. You'll be able to make larger gathers so that you can get this petal structure here. We're also gonna introduce these tweezers. These are called mashers. They do exactly what it sounds like. They mash the glass. Pretty self-explanatory, but I'll show you how to use those. Something I forgot to mention in my initial demo that I think Han had mentioned to a couple of y'all is that when you're using these metal tools, it's really, really important not to use them inside the flame. If you want to use them, you need to heat up the glass to the temperature that you want it to move, or the ideal temperature of sculpture, and bring it out and then use these tools. Metal and glass are pretty similar in the sense of when they heat up, they just like to chemically bond to each other. And the glass will stick to the metal if you're using them inside the flame. If that does happen, just make sure you take it out and try to either break the rod off or cut the rod off and dip it into the water. And that should be able to get it off. If it doesn't come off, just let me or Han know. We should be able to get it off for you guys. Okay. Any questions before we get started? How's everyone feeling? Feeling okay? Okay, cool. I'm gonna get started. So I'm gonna start with what's called a gather. We were doing gathers with the punties a little bit, but I'm gonna do quite a larger gather here. So you can see my hand position. I'm holding the glass upward so that gravity will naturally just ball the glass up on the top and create kind of a mushroom cap on the top of the rod. If I were to, gather like this or sideways, the gather is gonna kind of droop and fall to the ground. So you wanna hold it kind of upwards. And make sure you're only heating up the very tip of the rod. Once that starts to glow red and starts to move, you can put the rod further into the flame and start heating up further down the rod. So we're gonna heat up quite a bigger part of the rod than we were with the chains. You can see that just kind of folded into itself. Just continue rotating, balling this up, getting a nice large gather. And it's starting to move quite a lot. So just continue. I'm gonna do one more little movement into the flame. Get a little bit larger of a gather here. And get a nice ball at the top. All right. So this is about the size gather that I would like for the petal. We're gonna be smushing this, so it's important to get kind of as much as you want so we're gonna be smushing and stretching, so you want a good amount of glass there that you can work with. If you wanna make a smaller petal, you'll do a smaller gather. It's totally up to you. So I switch my hands. I'm right-handed, so I like to hold my tools with my right hand. And I'm gonna get this pretty hot and molten. So again, that nice orange color. When you're working with a thicker piece of glass like this gather at the top, it's gonna take longer to heat up than what you guys were doing with your chains. So again, patience is key. All right. I'm gonna come in, put these into the mashers and push down. All right. I pulled a little bit too much, so it kind of stretched out at the top there. You don't really want to pull just yet. That was just a slight mistake, but that's totally fine. So now you have this little ball, or flattened sphere, circle, whatever you want to call it. And now I'm going to come in and attach a punty on this side. I'm not super worried about it being a super cold seal. I am going to take it off, but we're going to be basically pulling like this to stretch this out into these petals. So you don't want the punty to be as soft or cold, as the punties you're using on your chains, because we're going to be tugging and pulling it. So you can seal it if you'd like. I'm still going to do technically a punty, but not worry if it seals, because it won't be an issue, as you'll see. So I'm going to heat up the bottom of this circle and heat up my punty. Push them together. Bring it out of the flame. Let it cool down, kind of rotate it as it's cooling so it stays straight. Okay, and now essentially I'm going to come in and fan heat this circle in the middle and slowly start to pull, so it pulls into this nice petal shape. This will be the bottom part of the petal, and this is going to be the top. So I'm going to focus mostly on the top so I can thin it out and leave that bottom part a little bit thicker. So when I fan heat, I'm mostly going to be fanning like 3/4 of the way and up. And I'm also going to work further up the flame and the cooler part of the flame, just so I have more control of the glass and it doesn't get too hot on me and bend all crazy ways or break off. And as I'm rotating, I'm also slightly tugging, so I can start to feel when the glass is heating up and I don't only have a visual on it. Because sometimes the glass will get hot and you won't even really see it. So I'm just rotating and pulling. And you can see this part is starting to thin out. So I'm going to avoid heating up the top, because if I heat up the top and keep pulling, this is just going to rip off. So I'm going to turn my flame down just a little bit and just start heating up the middle now. Less fanning motions and rotating, and now I'm going to start to pull. And you can see it's slowly starting to stretch out. And I'm working pretty slowly here. I'm doing really gentle motions. If you work too fast with harsh motions, you're gonna just pull out really thin petals. So it's really important that you're just working slowly, working pretty cold. You're not getting too much heat on this, just enough heat that there's a nice movement to the glass. I love making flowers too, and anything organic really, because glass is so organic, and symmetry and consistency in glass can be quite difficult, and it's pretty beautiful when you have different shaped petals, different length petals. Yeah, so it's a pretty intro-friendly way of working with the glass too. Okay, so I'm pretty happy with that length of petal. Again, this is my bottom part of the petal that's going to stick onto the larger flower here. I think this punty is sealed. I'm not even going to try to whack it off because it looks pretty sealed to it. So I'm just going to come in and flame cut it. And you can almost use this piece of glass that's going to stay on the petal to your advantage, because now you kind of have like a base that you're going to stick to the petal, or stick to the larger flower. Almost like a dot of glue. Great. Okay, so here's my petal. This has been sitting out of the flame for a while, so it's cold. I don't want to just stick it directly into the flame because it'll most likely crack, because this is not all the same piece of glass. Obviously, I've connected new pieces to this and slowly built this up. So I'm going to come in and just slowly fan it out in the end of the flame, kind of where you can barely even see the heat, but you know heat is there. So this is just slowly bringing the glass up to temperature so that when you do hold it into the flame directly, it's not going to crack on you, the petals aren't going to go flying off. And once you feel like, give this a good 20 seconds of fanning, you can start to slowly introduce it into the warmer parts of the flame. All right. And now it's hitting the flame for longer and hotter parts, and I don't hear any cracking. So I'm thinking I've heated this up nicely. It's pretty safe. This is hot. So I'm comfortable now holding this directly into the flame. I'm gonna bring this petal over. Important note, as you're reaching, be aware of this flame. I know a lot of you guys have long sleeves on. You might wanna roll them up for this, just to be extra safe. It can be hot even in parts that aren't directly on the flame, so just another safety precaution. I'm gonna continue fanning this and fan this petal throughout too, because it also is just kind of sitting in the wooden stand. Oh, this is quite large, that's fine. Okay, and now I'm gonna heat. This is gonna be a permanent seal. So I'm gonna get both parts, both the flower and the petal, quite hot so that I can seal them together. I'm only gonna spot heat on the flower where I want the petal to stick, and I'm only gonna heat up the very end of the petal. If you want the petals to be touching, you can also spot heat the sides of the petals, both the petal on the flower and the petal that you have in your hand, just so they can stick nicely to each other. And you want to get a nice orange glow. You come in and stick it on. Kind of leave it in the flame for a second. And then bring it out, let it cool down. You can see. This petal is much larger than the other ones I created. So instead of pulling it off up at the top, I'm gonna heat up kind of halfway, not even halfway down, maybe 3/4 of the way down, and pull it off so it can match the length a little bit more of the other petals. Okay, so now that I think that that is fully sealed, I'm gonna give it one more heat just to make sure she's happy. And then come in and heat up 3/4 of the way up, or 1/4 of the way down. And again, I'm just kind of fan heating the one part that I want to move and pull off. I'm not heating up the entire petal. And now I see there's movement. This whole time, I've been saying don't tug, don't tug, don't tug. Now I'm saying tug because we want this nice little end, kind of a sharper end at the end of the petals. So when you start to feel movement, you're gonna tug a little bit harder than I've been saying. And kind of let the flame, yeah, perfect. Great. So now we have a nice rounded off end. If you do tug and there's a long string, you can heat the string down and it'll still ball up like this. So now we have one petal attached. I'm gonna come in and just fan heat the flower and come into the torch and make sure that seal where I attach that petal is really strong, because I want that to be a permanent seal. This is also a time too where if you wanted this flower maybe to have a little bit of bend to the petal, you can come in, heat up the very base of the petal and start making it move a little bit. Add some structure to the petal. Bend it down or up, whichever you prefer, if you're looking for somewhat of a different shape than how you attached it. Okay, and now we have one of the petals attached. I'll do one more petal to demo, and then you guys can get started. Okay, so I'm gonna take this piece off. I don't really wanna work with that, and it's gonna be hard to make a gather with this petal, or the leftover of the petal, so I'm just gonna slowly take it off, turn up the heat. Once I have a nice little mushroom cap on the top of the rod, I'll take it out, mash it down. I get that circle again. Come in with the punty rod. You can see there's a little string on the end of this. I'm just gonna put it in the flame and melt it down. Turn the heat down a little bit. If you want to turn the heat down when you have that second ring out, you can just turn the propane to the right slightly and it'll adjust the flame. So this turning it up, turning it down. And you only really need to touch the propane. And the propane is the red knob, the red outer knob. If you have any questions or want help turning your torch up and down, just let me or Han know. Okay, so again, I'm gonna connect this little punty or handle to the end of the petal. Oop. My coffee's getting to me, I'm getting a little shaky. All right, let that cool down, stiffen up. And now again, just come in and fan. Let's switch my hands. Again, only really heating the top 3/4, because that's the only part that I want to move. And flipping and pulling, flip and pull. I'm getting a nice petal shape already. So I'm gonna move down a little bit further and just start heating up the base to stretch it out a little bit more. Because I don't want that base so round. I kind of like the longer petals. And I think that's pretty good. So, again, I'm gonna come in, turn my flame down a little bit and flame cut this little rod off. But only enough to leave like a dot of glass at the end. Okay, I'm gonna let this sit for a second and bring my flower back to the flame and heat her up and give her a little prep. And I think this is pretty good so far. Bring her down further in the flame. All right. Definitely feel some heat from that. So continue to rotate and prep. Kind of flash that flower. And I'm gonna come in and heat at the bottom of this petal. And I'll turn the flame down just a little bit and spot heat where I want to put this petal on. And once they both have a nice orange glow, the flower and the petal, stick them together. Kind of let them stay in the flame for a second. It's important that you stay pretty steady because if you move around a bunch, the glass is going to move with you. And you can see that the flower is starting to have a little bend to it. That's totally fine, totally fixable. It's important you just focus on your seals and then we can go in and fix the angles or the movement that happened after. So again, just give this a nice little flash. Make sure that seal is nice and happy. And then I'm gonna pull this petal off, or pull the handle off the petal. Great. And that's the start of that flower.